It's midnight, give or take, on August 21st, 1955. A group of terrified people, somewhere between 11 or 12 of them, depending on which account you read, come rushing through the doors of the Hopkinsville Police Station in Christian County, Kentucky. They're shaken, they're pale, and they've got a story that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. "We need help," they tell police. "Something's been attacking our house, and it isn't from around here." No, I know what you're thinking. Oh, great, another UFO story. Trust me, I had the same reaction the first time I heard this one many years ago. But stay with me, okay? Because what makes this story different isn't what was outside the house. It's really about the people inside it. It's also from my home state of Kentucky, which makes it very interesting for me. Now, the people in the story, they weren't drifters looking for attention. It wasn't somebody trying to sell books or to land a newspaper interview. It was a farm family and their house guests. And for nearly 4 hours, they claimed something surrounded their home, stared through their windows, walked across their roof, and shrugged off gunfire like it didn't matter. 70 years later, people are still arguing about what happened at that farmhouse. And I don't think that they're going to stop anytime soon. Welcome back to the Dark Folio, your creepy little coffee break. I'm May, and around here we spend our time digging into ghost stories, folklore, local legends, and the kind of strange encounters that tend to linger long after the facts have run out. If you're new, I am so glad that you found us. I'm glad you're here. And if you've been here for a while, thank you for coming back, because tonight's one I've been sitting on for a bit and I cannot wait to talk about it. This one's from my home state of Kentucky. And you know how I am. I get a little too excited every time I get to talk about where I grew up. So quick note before we start. Every story I cover here is researched as carefully as I can manage. But you know how it is once you step into folklore and the paranormal. Things get a little soft around the edges or a little vague. Witnesses remember things differently. Details drift over the decades. Sometimes what actually happened and what people believe happened gets so tangled up that you can't pull them apart anymore. So I'm not here to tell you what's true. I'm here to lay it out and let you hear it all, and then let you decide what you think. So, grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's go to Kelly, Kentucky, which is the case that basically invented the phrase little green men. All right, Christian County, Kentucky. And if you want to get technical, the actual farmhouse sat in a tiny community called Kelly, which is about 8 miles north of Hopkinsville proper. And it really does kind of matter because you're sometimes going to hear this called the Hopkinsville Goblins. Sometimes it's going to be the Kelly-Hopkinsville Encounter. There are actually several variations of the name, and they're all going to be right. The family ran to Hopkinsville for help, closest police station that they could find. The house actually sat in this really small community called Kelly. So, like I said, it's Sunday evening, August 21st, 1955, and the Sutton farmhouse is a really rural Kentucky farmhouse of the time. It doesn't have running water, no phone, no television. This is a real small place, the kind of house where the family just gathers because there's not much else to do on a Sunday night. And tonight, that's Glennie Langford and her household, which are her grown sons Elmer, who everybody calls Lucky, and John Charlie, who goes by JC, along with Lucky's wife Vera and JC's wife Aline. And visiting them are Billy Ray Taylor and his wife June up from Pennsylvania. Now, there's a detail here that doesn't usually make it into all of the retellings, but I'm going to pass it along to you because I found it kind of interesting and I thought you might too. Several of these people, Billy Ray, June, Lucky, and Vera specifically, were reportedly carnival workers. They weren't really the sheltered rural family who never left the county image that a lot of the stories portrayed them as. These were people who had traveled, they'd seen plenty of strange things, and I'm sure they'd seen plenty of strange people in all of their travels. So just remember that, these aren't really the backwoods people that sometimes the story makes them out to be. Around 7 o'clock, Billy Ray steps outside to draw water from the well. Remember, no running water in the house. And he comes back in real fast, wide-eyed, out of breath. talking about a light in the sky, a bright object, he says, streaking across the dark that came down somewhere out there past the tree line. And nobody really believes him. Lucky humors him. They go out to look. No fire, no wreckage, no crater. Probably a meteor, they think. A shooting star. Case closed. Everybody heads back inside to their card game. Except for an hour later, the dogs start losing their mind. And if you've ever been on a country farm in the middle of the night and the dogs start growing crazy, there's probably something out there. And then silence. And that's worse than the dogs going crazy. That kind of silence is the kind that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And that's when Lucky and Billy Ray see it, moving toward the house from the edge of the property. It's small, maybe 2 to 4 feet tall, depending on who you ask. And really, the accounts do vary more than you'd think in the retellings. So it has a large head, arms that are really long, ending in claws, and eyes, these big glowing yellow eyes. And it's got its arms raised up over its head, like it's surrendering. Or maybe just, maybe it's showing them something. But Lucky's no city boy spooked by shadows. He's hunted in these woods his whole life, and he knows exactly what should be there and what shouldn't be out in those woods. And he says this doesn't belong. So he grabs a shotgun, Billy Ray grabs a .22, and they go out and they do the only thing that 2 men in 1955 in rural Kentucky know how to do when something walks toward their house at night that they don't recognize. They open fire. Direct hit, maybe 20 feet. And the thing flips backward hard, like it's been shoved by something invisible. And then it just gets back up. It doesn't run. It doesn't bleed. They say it kind of glides. That's the word witnesses kept using. Glides, not walks, into the tree line and disappears. You'd think that's the whole story right there. It's not even close to over. They go back inside to catch their breath, and then somebody screams, "There's another one," right outside the window. Just watching them. Not hiding, not creeping around the edges, just standing there, studying them. So more gunfire erupts. This thing tumbles backwards off the porch. They hear it hit the tin roof of the shed out back with a sound that witnesses described as almost metallic. You know how like a bullet sounds when it's striking a bucket or a metal sign? And when the men go check, they find claw marks scratched into the metal and the wood siding of the house. But no body, no blood, nothing. And for the next 3 hours or so, the Sutton farmhouse is effectively under siege. Faces in the windows, shapes on the roof, movement in the tree line. Witnesses counted somewhere between 12 and 15 separate appearances over the course of the night. Every time the men fired, the same result. The creatures flipped backward like they weighed nothing, and then they vanished or they drifted off completely unbothered. Nothing like that should be possible for a living thing that had just taken a shotgun blast at close range. And the part that is genuinely the eeriest detail in the whole case is that, by most accounts, these things actually never tried to get in. They didn't attack. They just watched the family. One witness later said it felt like being an animal in a zoo, like something intelligent was on the other side of the glass taking notes and just watching them. Okay, so imagine that. You're trapped in your own house. Kids are crying because they did have kids there. The ammunition is running low because they're shooting every time that one of these creatures pops up. And the thing outside your window isn't really trying to break down the door. It's just watching you. By 11 o'clock, the family is done. All of them pile into cars and they drive straight for the Hopkinsville Police Station. All right, quick pause before we get into the investigation and the aftermath. If folklore and small-town hauntings are your thing, go ahead and follow the Dark Folio wherever you're listening. And if you'd like, a rating and a review would really help this podcast out. Okay, back to the goblins. Police Chief Russell Greenwell later said something that stuck with investigators for 70 years. These weren't troublemakers, not this family. They had no history of drinking, no pattern of tall tales, and it was even noted that the officials agreed alcohol was not a factor. These were genuinely frightened people, kids included. So the response was real. When they showed up at the police station, everyone took them very serious. City police, state troopers, deputy sheriffs, and 4 military police from the Army post at nearby Fort Campbell, not the Air Force, despite what you'll read in a lot of the tellings online. But they all came and they searched the property and found broken windows, holes in the screens consistent with gunfire, and claw-marked siding. What they didn't find, a body, a crashed craft, blood, anything that you could put in an evidence bag and call proof. Now, you'll often hear this story told as the investigation found zero evidence of a hoax, full stop, case closed, as unexplained. That's really only half true. One prominent UFO researcher, Jerome Clark, did write that police and Air Force personnel found no evidence of a hoax. But when the Air Force's own Project Blue Book, the official program tasked with cataloging and investigating UFO reports, filed its paperwork on this case, they listed it as a hoax. No further comment, no elaboration, just hoax. So even the record disagrees with itself, believers point to the credibility of the witnesses and the fact that there is a total lack of a rational culprit. Skeptics point to the Blue Book's official classification and move on. Both of these things are true at the same time, and that's the most interesting part of the case. It's not settled, bet that it's never gonna be. And the leading rational explanation is owls. It's always owls. Like the Mothman was possibly an owl. If you follow true crime, some of the true crime stories are it's an owl. It's always the owls, man. Specifically, great horned owls. They're nocturnal, they fly nearly silent, and their eyes reflect light in a way that can look really unnatural at night. And a mated pair defending a nest will absolutely dive bomb anything that gets close. They can be very territorial. Skeptic researcher Brian Dunning has pointed out that a great horned owl standing at its full height lines up almost exactly with the lower end of the reported creature sizes. And there's an explanation for that eerie greenish glow that some witnesses described near the fence line too. Foxfire, which is a bioluminescent fungus that grows on decaying wood in exactly this part of Kentucky. And I hear that if you see it, it does look very unearthly, like something supernatural. But it's not aliens. It's just biology doing something that most people have never seen up close. But what might be a better question would be, could 2 experienced hunters really mistake an owl for a silver claw-handed humanoid for 3 to 4 straight hours, under gunfire, at close range, over a dozen separate sightings? That's part of the owl theory that a lot of people have a problem with. It's the best rational explanation on the table, but it doesn't mean that it's a complete one. What I can tell you is this: nobody in that family ever profited from the story. They didn't tour, they didn't do a lecture circuit, they didn't cash in, they didn't write a book, they didn't sell the rights to the story or anything. If anything, the attention got so overwhelming that the family eventually left the area altogether. That's not really how a hoax for money is supposed to end. And if you're not real familiar with the Kelly-Hopkinsville case, it's not just a UFO footnote. It actually shaped how pop culture views aliens. In the 1970s, Steven Spielberg came across this case while he was researching what would become Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And apparently, it stuck with him enough that he started developing a much darker project called Night Skies, basically a home invasion horror film about hostile aliens laying siege to an isolated farmhouse. Sound familiar? That project never got made as originally conceived. Instead, it splintered into 2 movies that you've definitely heard of. The darker, more menacing material eventually fed into Poltergeist, and the idea of one alien getting separated from the group, maybe not hostile at all, maybe just scared and alone, became E.T., the extraterrestrial. That's not the only fingerprint that this case left on pop culture either. The 1986 horror comedy Critters, I loved growing up, is loosely based on it. And there's a Pokemon, Sableye, if you know your Gen 3, whose design, it's said, was directly inspired by descriptions of the Hopkinsville creatures. A Chicago theater company wrote an entire musical about it called It Came from Kentucky. And in 2020, the History Channel's own Project Blue Book series dedicated a full episode to dramatizing this exact night. And as a Kentucky girl, I'd like to point out that the story never really left home. The community of Kelly hosts the Little Green Men Days festival at Kelly Station Park, not far from where the actual farmhouse stood. Live music, alien costume contests, vendors selling every kind of intergalactic souvenir you can imagine. And in 2024, Hopkinsville rolled out its own companion event called Alien Invasion Day. And for the 70th anniversary in 2025, the city went even bigger with Goblin Con, a full UFO and paranormal expo. Geraldine Sutton Stith, the daughter of one of the original witnesses, showed up to speak. She wrote a book about her family's experience called Alien Legacy, and she still travels the world telling this story. She said publicly that she believes what her family saw was real, possibly extraterrestrial, possibly connected to a crashed craft that the military quietly removed. So, if you're ever driving up I-24 through western Kentucky the third week of August, which is why I happen to record it this week, you might just roll into a town that's throwing a party for the night 11 or 12 of its residents nearly didn't survive an alien attack. Because that's the thing about the Kelly-Hopkinsville case. It was never closed, never fully explained, just left open, on purpose or not, for 70 years and counting. Maybe it was owls. Maybe it was something else entirely. Watching a farmhouse full of strangers the way you'd watch fish in a tank. Whatever it was, I'm glad that you joined me here on the Dark Folio. Thank you for spending your time with me, my kindred spirits. I'm May, and remember, stay curious and always stay a little dark.